Hi everyone, I'm Brittany Powers, and today we're going to discuss the concept of using people first language. Now, before we can embrace this new way of speaking, we have to understand what is people first language. In the words of Kathy Snow, people first language puts the person before the disability. It describes what a person has, not what a person is. People first language is used to communicate appropriately and respectfully with and about an individual with a disability. People first language emphasizes the person first, not the disability. This quote was pulled from the CDC. Disability is natural sight says putting the person before the disability and eliminating old, prejudicial, and hurtful descriptors is the idea behind people first language. I think this one is really important because a lot of times terms that are commonly used are outdated and really tied more to the stereotype than the condition that a person has. And all of these ideas can be wrapped up if you really just consider that when you're speaking to or about someone, to always follow the golden rule. You want to speak about someone in the way that you would want to be spoken about and really honor that person and their value and not assume that their whole identity is wrapped up in a challenge that they face. Now, why should we commit to this new way of speaking? One reason is because people with disabilities constitute our nation's largest minority group. 1 in 5 Americans has a disability. Again, this quote was pulled from an article by Kathy Snow. Outdated and inaccurate medical terms imply negative stereotypes, as I mentioned before. And most importantly, a diagnosis does not define a person's value or their potential. Just to add to that too, just because a person has a certain disability does not mean that they will be anything like another individual who has that same disability. So it's really dangerous to ever assume anything about a person or group someone with another person who has a similar disability. It doesn't mean that they're anything like that other person. Continuing on why we should commit to this, negative labeling can be isolating, it's demeaning, and hurtful. Next, focusing on an individual's problem is inappropriate. So if someone has an individual or a disability, placing focus on that in a lot of circumstances is very inappropriate. If you look at a person who does not have a disability, you would never talk about their various problems that they face throughout their life. It just wouldn't be a topic of conversation that you would have with someone, especially if you weren't very close to them or if the topic wasn't relevant. It would be inappropriate in almost every setting. So we need to treat people who have disabilities in the same way that we would treat those without disabilities. Negative language choice also leads to misconceptions, and misconceptions lead to segregation. Again, another great quote by Kathy Snow. And last, we should commit to this because our language shapes our attitudes and our attitudes shape our language. We really want to change the concept that people have about individuals with disabilities because they've been misunderstood globally and in our country for so long, and it's time that we take action to make that change. Here are some examples of how small changes can really make a big difference. Instead of ever calling someone handicapped, we don't want to define them as a handicapped person. Instead, we should say that person has a disability, if it's even necessary to mention it at all. Specifically speaking into handicapped, Kathy Snow's article mentioned the fact that handicapped stems from an old game in which people were supposed to have a cap in their hand, and that person was usually the loser of the game. And so handicap in general is a very negative term with negative implications, and It's honestly not right for that term to be tied to a person with a disability, because we don't want to imply that that person is a loser or facing loss generally in life. Next, instead of saying a disabled person, again, you don't want to label someone according to their disability. It's just something they have. It's not who they are. The next one, Mary is retarded. Honestly, the word retarded should never be used unless it's by a medical professional. That word is outdated and in almost all scenarios, highly offensive. Instead, you should say, Mary has a cognitive diagnosis. Moving on, instead of saying Sancho is blind, Sancho has a visual impairment. Sancho is more than the blindness that he has. Instead of saying she is epileptic, you should say she has epilepsy. She's not defined by the disability that she has. In the last one, instead of saying the autistic actress, you should say instead the actress who has autism. But what I want to mention about all of these is the disability that someone has in their life oftentimes should never be addressed unless it's by an educator who's specifically addressing those needs, or a medical professional who's specifically addressing those needs, or unless it's to communicate how to best take care of someone and serve them. If it's not tied to any of those examples, most often it should not even be mentioned in conversation. I really thought this quote was a powerful way to conclude this presentation as we consider the importance of using people first language in our interactions with people and talking about them. And Gemma Troy said this: remember, your words can plant gardens or burn whole forests down. I hope that you consider this topic for a little bit longer and reflect on it alone today, and really use this learning to become more mindful more often about the words that you choose to say when speaking about someone and to someone. Remember, everybody, treat others the way you want to be treated in action and in words. Thanks for watching.